Welcome to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb your cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. I'm Tanner and I'm joined by Anthony. We're two IT executives with 35 years of experience. Let's start the show. Welcome to the vendor dating game, where every decision matters and picking the wrong partner could leave you with buyer's remorse. We're here to help you find the right fit before you say I do to that contract. All of us remember the dating game. I remember seeing reruns of it when I was a kid. It was always on TV, and I always thought it was funny that they would ask these questions of each other to try to figure out who was the right fit. And Anthony and I were talking, we thought this is really the process that you go through with vendors, right? And our vendors, a lot of times we have long-term vendors, but sometimes we're either looking at a product, maybe a vendor doesn't work out, we're looking for a new vendor. So we thought it might be kind of nice to go through what we think of as like the best qualities for a vendor to have. So let's just jump right into it, Anthony. What makes a good vendor? What are the qualities you look for whenever you're searching for a new vendor?
I think the biggest thing is just transparency, them being upfront. And if you talk to a vendor and has this product ever not worked for someone, but if they don't give you an answer, and maybe, it's something where they haven't sold a whole lot. But if they give you a real answer and give you where it didn't work out and kind of explain the why and say, it wasn't the right fit. And, like that shows that they've got a lot of honesty. It's kind of like, when you're doing an interview with someone, ask them about what's their worst trade or something like that. And if they don't give you a real answer, it looks real bad. On top of that, I would say, I hate to say this, but if it's something where they don't have many products, that product's got to be good. I've got some salespeople that I deal with that are great, but they don't have a good.
Yeah.
So the vendor isn't great. And also, I'd say just someone that's knowledgeable. I hope I don't make anyone mad, but there's a bad tendency to have 20-year-olds that are very good looking selling a product that don't know anything about technology or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with having those people, but when we're looking at a product, we want to talk to someone that's knowledgeable, and just having knowledgeable staff represent the company and know what you're looking for and ins and outs of your company, that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I don't mind that because I feel like in some cases, like, especially initial sales and contact can be an entry-level job for a lot of folks. But what I would say to those people, and I know there's got to be some vendors out there quivering. If you listen to this and you're one of the vendors, don't worry. We're not doing any name dropping. Or if we do, it won't be in a negative light. But just know when to bring in that technical presence. Usually there's like a technical sales or something like that. Bring them in early. Be that facilitator. Do the things that you know, which is like how to facilitate. Or if you don't know them, learn them. But facilitate the conversations and then bring the right people together. The technical staff on the customer side with the technical staff on your side. Don't try to, I think we thought about this a lot in the AI world that we live in, is AI never says, I don't know. I would say if you're a salesperson, just don't fall into that trap. Say, I don't know. I'll find out for you. Don't have to be the one that knows every single answer. Bring in those people. But on the just general things, I always look for really good communication and responsiveness. I think in today's world especially, I think there's been a resurgence, I guess, in having a better work-life balance, right? So I'm not expecting someone to just pick up the phone anytime with me, and I try to respect that. But being pretty responsive when you're in the office, having open communication channels. You mentioned being transparent, being honest. Here's why this is the way it is, having a good answer for that. I think those are all things we really, really look for. But going back to you here, what's the opposite of that? I mean, like, what are the things that, if you have a vendor, what are the things they need to not do? Or if you're looking for a new vendor, what are the things you're looking for, red flags maybe, when you have those initial conversations?
Being pushy is a big one. And I don't mind getting asked a question, but if I say no or I'm not interested, I don't want to keep talking about that. Dropping the conversation after that is pretty important. And two, it's just, I know this is just part of a sales tactic, but trying to use flattery just to make a sale, and like, it's not honest or it's not for real. That's something that, happens quite a bit. People try to use flattery, and even us having this podcast, and I think legitimately there's some vendors that listen and actually like the podcast, but I would say probably at least over 50% are just saying it, trying to get their way into communicating with me and me responding to them.
Yeah, I would say I have had, if there's vendors listening, don't follow the podcast and then immediately reach out to me to sell me something. That's that's a red flag. I was, yeah, I agree with what you said. I think I would add to that, and I would say people that don't listen, they don't listen to your struggles. So they're just where you're talking past each other. Here are the things we're struggling with. Here's this product that kind of does some of those things, maybe. I would say vendors that push a product that's not the right fit for you, or they don't really understand your needs, right? So I think this happens, I guess I will name drop this as I don't think this is anything bad, but we're a kind of a medium-sized business, right? Think of like Cisco, right? They have several lines. They have like a real small business, kind of a Ubiquity competitor. Then they have their Meraki competitor for switches, and they have Cisco switches. So I think having a conversation with us and not understanding which one, like let's say what our budget really can afford is the Meraki switches, not selling us on the other ones, like not selling us on a cheaper one that doesn't meet all the requirements, maybe security requirements that we need, not selling us on a more expensive one, selling us on the right product. So I would say someone not willing to do the research to actually get to know you to understand how they can match the needs of the company with the product that they're trying to sell.
Tanner, I do gotta ask you just because we were talking about it. Like, I'm assuming this must work on someone, but what do you think about vendors that are offering you like gift cards and stuff like this just to talk? Like, does that it's got to be working on someone because they wouldn't keep trying it.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
what's your thoughts on that?
obviously, I think it's enticing, right? I think, gosh, I've gotten ones, I think I've gotten like emails about free AirPods or something. I mean, it's kind of nuts. Some vendors are really giving you hundreds of dollars stuff just to take a call. That's not something we do, not something I do. Honestly, I think in general, just how I feel about it, I would say I really don't mind it, but I think it just creates potentially an opportunity for someone to do something to pick a vendor because of that. I think if like in a perfect world where every person they talk to really went into it with no bias and was like, I don't care if they give me something, I'm just gonna find out if this is the right product for me. It wouldn't be a big deal, but I think I don't think they push it that way, but I think for people that accept that, I think that kind of puts you in a weird place. So I wouldn't do that. And then also, I would say just check on whatever your company's policy on that is because you don't want to get in a issue. But I don't know. I don't hate it. I kind of think of it as like swag at a conference, right? Used
Yeah.
to the swag was like amazing, right? You know, you go to a conference, you get like a polo. You had to go over to get the polo. That was like their chance to like have a conversation with you. Obviously, now they're giving away different stuff, and but I don't hate it. I feel like that's what works. So be it. Vendor size. Does size matter with when you're picking a vendor? Is there such thing as too small a vendor for your company or the vice versa, too big?
So the answer to that is yes. There can be a company too big and too small, but with a caveat, I would say is you got to take everything in when you're reviewing them. We've got two vendors where like they're under 8 people, and when we were initially looking at them and the services they offer, honestly, that was a strike against them. But
Hmm.
they had so many pros that it outweighed that, and we took a chance on those 2 vendors, and it ended up they're probably our 2 best vendors that we have. So, I definitely would take it as a strike, and I think on the other side too, I think if you got a huge company, you're just gonna be a number to them and maybe you're not gonna buy very many of their products, that's a strike too, because you're just gonna be a number or you won't get the service or
Hmm.
their time of day just because you're small beans to them.
Yeah, I agree with those. Um, I would add also, I think it's not just size, but also culture, because there are some companies where the culture really fits, even though that could be small or large. And I think there are some where the culture doesn't fit. So it does the culture mesh with your culture? If you have to have a lot of approvals, do they have to have a lot of approvals? Is it more rigid or is it more laid back? Because if you're laid back and they're really rigid, or you're really rigid and they're laid back, I just feel like that's not going to vibe really well. We've talked a lot about the vendor side of things, all right? The characteristics that they can possess that are good things, the characteristics that are bad things. But every relationship is a two-way relationship. So how to, in your my eyes, how do you make sure that you maintain a good vendor relationship? So once you pick this vendor, you've went through the qualities you like, the culture fits, the size is right. How do you make sure that you're doing your side of the kind of the vendor customer relationship?
I think the big thing is just communications. There's some vendors where even if I'm not like interested in a product from them or whatever, like I'll still reach out and try to communicate with them. And then even there's some where we use them a lot, and every once in a while I'll throw them a bone on just like going with them, even though they're not the absolute cheapest. And I won't do that on everything, but sometimes it's just good to try to throw things their way because just like any company, like they got to be profitable. You want them to be profitable. I think the big thing is just like having one be transparent back with them and have a open line of communications.
Yeah, I would say appropriate level communications, definitely on our side, but also on the vendor side. I think I have a vendor. I'm gonna shout him out. I won't say which company, but Frank, if you're listening, you know who you are. But he's like he has the perfect amount of communication. Like he'll just reach out sometimes. Hey, there's some pretty good deals going on. XYZ product. If it's anything you need, just let me know. And that's all he says. He never will come back to me unless I actually say, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, actually we need XYZ product. I really appreciate that. And I totally agree with you. My pet peeve is people that beat up every vendor, every single purchase on price, because you're going to need someone to owe you a favor. And think about if you, I don't know, if you got a friend and you borrow tools from them and they borrow tools from you, um, and every single time they bring back a tool, you're like, oh my gosh, you brought it back and it's like filthy or whatever. And then when you bring it back filthy, they never say anything. Like that's just a recipe for a bad relationship over time. I think you need to, within reason, obviously you don't want to pay 50% more for something, but I think if something's reasonable, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to make sure that you know it's reasonable, don't beat them up every time on price. Sometimes you're going to need it, right? There's going to be that time where they come back to you with a quote, it's $10,000 over whatever you have in the budget, and you're just going to have to say, back to that transparency, that, hey, I really don't have it. This is the budget I have. I'm being honest with you. And honestly, I would say more often than not, they're going to be like, okay, I can make it happen because you haven't done that to them every time.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're nickel and diming them for every single penny on every single transaction, then those are the transactions you're just not going to have. So, highly recommend that. And I think a lot of times when we think of vendor relationships, we only think about what they have to do. And I think we need to be responsive. We need to have good communication as well. It is a relationship or a partnership. Any thoughts on that?
I do want to touch on one experience, and I can't prove it or anything like that, but we were buying some switches, and the vendor that we work with, he's very transparent, and his markup is very little. And we were doing a significant amount. I mean, he's kind of doing it as a favor. We use other services with him, but he'll resell us the switches. And anyways, we had another vendor that's been trying to beat down our door, and I was like, I'll throw it out there and see what they do. And they came back, and it was a couple grand cheaper. And I'd be willing to bet. I didn't know this. Like normally I would, say, well, if they're cheaper, I'm going to go with it. But the guy that we're working with has been so solid, and he doesn't gouge us. And, I've checked him several times. We'll talk about that. But this new vendor, they were probably eating some cost to that. They might have even been selling it at no markup or even eating some of that just to get in the door. And like I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go with them because like I know I'm getting treated right by this vendor, and if I go with them, who knows what they're going to mark up the next product? They're thinking about what they're going to do down the road, and so they're willing to eat some of the costs up front just to get it in the door.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think loyalty is something we need to have as customers of vendors as well. A lot of vendors call me, and we could talk about cold calls for an hour, I feel like, but cash the cold calls. Please, the vendors, stop with the cold calls. But I understand you got to do it. But um, a lot of people will call and they'll be like, "Oh, we can get you such a great deal. Don't you want to check this price?" And I say to myself, "Is no. How would you want me to treat you if you were our vendor? If we if we were company A and company B calls me and is, hey, we can get you a price. What if we were company B? Would they want us every single time they provided a price? Oh, company A, I'm gonna go check with company A. I want to go check with company C.
Mhm.
Try to treat people how you want to be treated. And I think that's good for our side. And I also think that creates better vendors. They always say to be the change you want to see. So if you're a good customer and you have those good traits, then I think those vendors with good traits are in some ways going to find you.
I do want to mention a pet peeve just because it made me think about it. One thing that aggravates me, and I understand people are told what to do, but if I have to have a 2-hour conversation with you to get pricing, like, I'm not gonna do. That's one thing I wish that like, sometimes I just wanna know what the price is, like, I don't need to do an hour demo and stuff like that, and I've had some vendors, like, I've just been upfront with them. I was like, "Look, I ain't got time to do everything. I just wanna know ballpark what this costs. I don't wanna waste your time. I don't wanna waste my time because we've got a certain budget number, and if you're twice that, like, it's doesn't matter how good the product is." But,
Yeah.
it would be nice just to be able to get costs without having a half-hour conversation and then an hour demo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it must be I don't know. I agree. And I'm not going to try to make too much negativity on the episode, but I would say I don't understand why I have to have like a half hour call and then I schedule an hour demo. Can I not just schedule a demo over email and we accomplish both things at the same time?
Yeah.
I don't know. Some vendor, when we publish this out, one of the vendors hopefully will be listening. Let us know why that is. Maybe it's something to do with the way you guys do things or kind of the hierarchy of how that sales works, but it drives me crazy. All right, we're going to take a quick break. If you're enjoying this, make sure you're following us so you never miss an episode. You can follow wherever you're listening right now, whether that's on audio only or if you're watching us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe or follow us and make sure your notifications are on so you always get notified when our new content comes out. And when we post things on social media, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have a comment, either good or some sort of constructive criticism, please leave it on our social media or you can reach out to us directly, show it offthewirepodcast.com. We're always looking for episode ideas. Some of our best episodes, I think, have been ones where listeners suggested the topic and we went on and went through it. So if you have something that you want to hear us talk about, just reach out to us. All right. So let's get back to it. We talked about not, I guess, beating someone up on price on every single time, but when should you get multiple quotes on something in your mind?
Let me tell you a story before I answer that.
Okay.
So, I had a example. It was I'll tell you the equipment. It was Palo Alto firewalls. I reached out to a colleague and they told me they're like, "Look, we've shopped around," and they named a vendor and they're like, "We get the best pricing from them, and we get it consistent." And we're like, "I think they're gonna be," and they knew the other vendors that we shopped with, and they were like, "They'll beat their price, I believe." And anyways, we're spending a lot of money on these firewalls, and I was like, "I'll get 3 quotes and we'll see." So,
Hmm.
I reached out to the old vendor that I used to use first, and then I reached out to the vendor that I got recommended from my friend second, and then I reached out to some other vendor. I didn't even get the 3rd quote back, but when I got the quotes back, the first quote I got back was from the original vendor, and it was more expensive than I thought it would be, but it ended up being cheaper than the second vendor that I got recommended to.
Huh.
And I spoke with the Palo Alto people, and I hope I don't get anyone in trouble, but they're like, "Only the first vendor that you reach out to is gonna get preferential pricing." Because I reached out to that vendor first, they got a little bit of a discount from Palo Alto, the second vendor did not. If
Mm.
you're looking to get 3 quotes, let me say what happened with this one. Palo Alto said that if you wait 6 months and get another quote, we can give them preferential pricing. So I waited 6 months. Fortunately, we were doing this way in advance. And so
Mm.
I reached out to the vendor that I was recommended to, and after 6 months and got pricing, and it was the best price by far. Like, and it was well worth the 6-month wait. If you're looking at the same exact equipment, and I know this depending on what you're looking at, that's not always a rule, but there's a lot of companies where they're only gonna give the first one to reach out to them preferential
Hmm.
pricing. So that's why it's important really just to have a trusted vendor and have some loyalty to them. The vendor that our old vendor, I'll say this, I felt like we were getting gouged in the first place, so that's why I was really second guessing that. And come to find
Hmm.
out, we were getting gouged quite a
Yeah.
bit. But with the 3 quotes, if you're looking at different firewalls, like I would 100% get 3 quotes. But like now, if I'm gonna look at a Palo Alto, like there's no point of getting 3 quotes because only one is really gonna give me whoever the first one is going to give us better pricing. Like when we're looking at hardware, like servers and stuff like that, we'll get 3 quotes because we're looking at multiple vendors. But when you're looking at one product, I don't really know that there's any value of getting 3 quotes. What do you think on
Yeah,
that, Junior?
yeah, I think I'm with you on that. One thing I would ask you is, what if the company that you're buying from sells all three different types of products that you're looking at? So let's say we'll use your firewall example. Let's say they sell Cisco, they sell Palo Alto, and they sell Fortinet. Do you still get multiple quotes?
So we've done that both ways, and I can't really give you a reason or logic behind that. We've had some. I guess it depends on how good that relationship is. Like we've got one vendor where we have a great relationship, and we were looking for wireless to replace our wireless system, and we looked at 3 different wireless access points, but the vendor that we trust, we got a quote for 2 of the different products. The 3rd one they didn't resell, so we did go get a quote from someone else, but I don't know what you got a logic or a reason to do that or not do that?
I don't honestly, I don't know. The only time we've ever had this happen has been like, and we're going to talk about actually next, we're going to talk about different types of vendors, but the only time we've really had that happen is when it was like a true VAR situation where we were going to buy a product and they were also going to provide professional services.
Mhm.
And honestly, I don't know if it was warranted, but in my mind, I thought if they sell all three of the same product, they're either, in my mind, they're either going to know one much better than the other one. So they're going to have a preference, right? Imagine you're a car dealer and you sell, I don't know, Chevy, GMC, and Cadillac. You like Chevy best, right? So you're going to lean one way or the other. That was my thought. My other thought is that different vendors might provide different incentives at different times of the year. So, like I got no problem with salesmen making commission, but if you're making, let's say, 20% commission on one firewall and you're making 30% commission on another firewall, you might have a tendency to, and I think a lot of that comes down to trust. And you mentioned that, like having that really transparent, trustworthy relationship. If you have that, I don't think maybe that's as big of a deal, but maybe if it's a newer vendor and you're still building that with them, that was my thoughts that they they may just be more comfortable with one product than another, so they might steer us in that way, but it might not be the best product for us. We did that with the sand one time. I think we got 5 different quotes from 5 different VARs. Um, and I'm gonna be honest, like the sand we chose didn't really work out for us, but I don't think it was because of the process.
Yeah.
And it was just whatever reason the product just didn't meet our needs. Um, but I think there are times I think when it makes sense to get multiple quotes. Whenever you're buying something you buy on a regular basis, I don't know, maybe you're buying 10 iPads or something. I don't think you need to go get a bunch of quotes. One on the Apple stuff, it's pretty tight anyway, but I think have that loyalty. Have as long as you have good trust with your vendor, just get the quote, know that it's within line and go ahead and get the product. So I kind of alluded to it, but um I called them like commodity vendors versus VARs. Do you have both? Do you have people like I don't know, commodity vendors maybe could be like a CDW a lot of times. Do you guys have both of those? Do you buy only from VARs? How do you guys what's your preference on that?
We've got both. I've got a commodity vendor that is awesome, honestly, and that's great to have because, for the most part, when you have one of them, like, they sell about everything. Like, that's the plus with that, and the fact that we've have a solid relationship, when I need something in a pinch. And sometimes like you need something and it wasn't budgeted for and you got to get the absolute best price. I feel that person has tried to make ends meet in that situation. But we use several VARs. We've got the one we bought the switches from. They're a small VAR, and anyways, we've got a good relationship with them. We buy cradle points from them. Now we buy switches from them. And anyways, that's just a good relationship that we have, and I really don't think I wouldn't I would recommend having both or having you wanna have more than just one trusted vendor. You wanna have a few,
Mm-hmm.
because even the big commodities, like, they're not gonna have everything, or
Yeah.
they may have it, but they may not have the support or something like that. So I think it's better safety for you as a organization to have multiple vendors that you trust.
Yeah, we have the same. We actually have one of each. We have one vendor that we use as a VAR. Our pretty much our guidelines for when we use one or the other is whether or not we need help. Do we need help in the selection of it? Well, I would say, let me go back a little bit. Do we need help? A lot of help in the selection of it. We need to sit down. We need to demo different things. Maybe it's a new firewall. Maybe it's a new cybersecurity software or something like that. Then yeah, we're going to use the VAR because we feel like their engineers are going to help us out. Are we potentially going to have professional services? Of course, we may want that in there. We also have and I say it's a commodities vendor, but really they do a lot more than just commodities. Of course, we can buy like, an iPad from them or a keyboard or whatever else, but they also can do renewals on support. I mean, we go through them a lot. And our guideline on that is, do we know what we want and we're supporting it? A good example might be like virtualization software, right? We know what we're getting, we know what we want, and we have the support. We can call in if there's an issue. All we really need from them is pricing on that renewal. Or maybe it's even switches. A lot of times we'll buy switches from this vendor because we don't really need help putting in a new switch. Now, if it's something large, maybe we're doing a hardware change out in our data center, then yeah, we might want professional services. So we just go by that. Do we need help with this more than a few back and forth emails at the beginning? Then yeah, we want to use a full on VAR. And if not, we like having the commodity vendor. We just send them an email. This is what we need 10 of it. Here's the model number. And they're like, all right, here's the quote.
Yeah.
And I love that because, man, sometimes you just need to get something done and you don't want to have to go back and forth over 15 emails. Have you ever had a vendor? And I think this is maybe, I don't know, to me, this is something newer. I've had experience with this, I would say, one time. Um, and I was going to ask you if you had experience. Have you ever had a consulting vendor that helps you determine which vendor you need?
I have not. I've seen that service. I say that we haven't. We've hired vendors that do that as a service and gave us some free advice and ended up being great advice. So I see the reason to do that. But honestly, I haven't hired one for that purpose. But we've got one where I've seen it with AMI systems. We're using them for a project and they've got experts in AMI and they know about all the different vendors. That's a service that they offer. And if we're going to switch, maybe we would, but they gave us a lot of free advice, which is where we're currently doing business with them. So I definitely see the need or the want for that. And I wouldn't shy away from it if we're making a big enough decision.
We had one experience with it. We were looking at some contact center software and a vendor approached us and said, "Hey, we help people go through this process." They sat in on all the demos. Now it was weird. I think it was, I don't know if anyone's been on a Disney vacation, but Disney does this a lot where they have these like travel agents that basically you can book through. They know all about Disney, and then Disney basically pays them the commission. So whoever, it doesn't matter what what rides you select or whatever. And then the scenario was the same as that. This is a vendor, and they are paid by all the vendors, all these different contact center vendors, and it doesn't matter. They can be transparent because they get paid no matter what, but it's not something that we had to pay for. Was it useful? I think somewhat. I wouldn't call it very useful. There was a couple points they brought up. It did feel weird. Um, and I don't know. I think I'd have to go through a couple more processes that use that kind of process. It was a little strange because of just not something that I had done before.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was like, didn't negatively impact us, but I'm not sure there was a ton of positive impact other than a few kind of tips here or there. But I don't know if that's like a common thing in all. I don't know if it's just certain, I guess, subsets of the technology industry that use that kind of thing, but I've definitely seen like consultants that you come in and help you, but this is more of like their entire company is really centered around this, and yeah, I don't know. I guess they are consultants, but it was the first experience I'd ever had with that.
I think the value I would see out of that is really the guy that we spoke with about AMI. There was a few questions that we didn't even think of to ask, and they're very important. And he told us, I would ask this question, and we asked it, and it was something that really would negatively impact us. And obviously, the vendor wasn't throwing that out when we were communicating with them, but I think if it's something where maybe you're not super knowledgeable about those products, the people making the decisions, like, I could see the value of having someone on to make sure that you don't make a mistake. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something that's gonna cost a lot of money, like, I think that's
Yeah.
worthwhile, and we're now while we're not using it, we went and looked at our basically, like, our heart of our system, our CIS and FIS systems. We did that on our own, but I know that there's vendors out there that help with that. And
Hmm.
honestly, that's such a heavy decision. If we were to do it again, I might even consider that. But anyways, I'm happy with what we did. If you're doing something that's going to cost a lot of money or make a major impact on your business, like but it all comes down to expertise. If you're dealing with someone that's an absolute expert, been in the industry 15 years and knows it inside out, like I think there could be value there.
Yeah. I think if I had to do it over, I would want something where I was paying them because I feel like my comments earlier, if it's a service they're providing for free, are they going to try to sway me toward whichever one pays them the most commission? Because they have to get paid at some point. They're not going to do that. So in this particular case, it seemed pretty laid back. There wasn't any real pressure one way or the other. It felt pretty honest and transparent in that case. But I would say I think I would prefer me to be paying their way through because then I feel like I'm the only one. Like I'm providing their financial, the financial part of that transaction, so they can really give me an honest answer.
The two I
Um,
know of, like you actually just pay them for that service.
yeah, this
Yeah.
is one I had never run into this, but the vendor we selected basically paid them. So that was interesting. Maybe that's just in that particular subset of technology or not. But um, we talked about good characteristics, bad characteristics of vendors. How do you know when it's time to move on from a vendor?
With this, I try to shake this out early and I try to do, if I'm working with a new vendor, like I try to give them a smaller project up front and I'll have one and like I hate to be so negative, but I'll just give you one that was it's a bad example. And there's a company and like they actually have a very good reputation, was highly recommended by to use them, but we use them kind of like a la carte. We were looking to change technologies to help reduce our PCI scope. And this is something they probably don't. In all fairness, this is probably a request that they don't get, but I expected them to help with that when they do PCI audits and stuff like that. Normally, their bread and butter is you sign up for like a yearly service or a 3-year service where they do pen test, vulnerability scans, typically what you get from a security vendor. But, anyways, we did this a la carte service and it was so painful. I will never use them after that. And they might, I know they got good people that work there, but it was just such a painful thing. We, up front, like I told them, I was like, "Look, we're willing to change technologies to help reduce," and I gave them the specific example of what we were looking to change to help reduce the scope, and we had 3 calls having that same exact conversation, and the 3rd one, I was a butt on it because I was like, "I've told you this from day 1," and anyways, so I kinda lost contact with this person, didn't hear from them for, like, 6 weeks, and then they come back and they're like, "Hey, I just went to another co-op and they changed out this thing and it helped reduce their scope." It was exactly what I recommended at the very
Hmm.
beginning, and it was like they just come up with it by visiting this vendor, and I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I've been asking you to look at." And anyways, he went and spent 30 minutes and helped me verify how that would apply. Like I had what I thought how it would reduce our PCI scope, and he went and did that. It was about 30 minutes worth of work. And we had 12 hours of consulting service. They charged me all 12 hours for that. And after that, I'm like, I don't care how good they are. Like, I'm not, that was such a terrible experience. I was like, I'm not going back. But
Yeah.
anyways, to answer the question, one, I try to shake that out early by doing like a small project. And then other times it's just there's a million different reasons when it's time to move on. You've got some where it like you were talking about earlier, you're in the honeymoon phase and they're providing you great support, they're communicating with you. And then 2 years later, you can't get an answer out of them or you can't get a
Hmm.
demo. It's crazy that there's vendors out there where you got to beg them to get a demo and can't get a demo. For that instance, it's time to move on. I'm sure you've dealt with some scenarios. What's some things that you think it's time to move on when you encounter?
Yeah, a few things for me. I think it goes along with what you were saying there, but I would say if I can't get a quote from you, it's not gonna we're not gonna be long. My whole thing is if I'm trying to pay you money, you should be pretty responsive. I understand that things happen. I think it goes back to our communication is just saying, "Hey, I'm really busy. I can get a quote, but it's going to be toward the end of the week." We have a great vendor that we work with, and not often does he say that, but so often he's like, "Hey, I'll get that quote, but it's probably going to be 2 or 3 days before they can get back to me." So it just lets me know up front what the schedule is going to be like, and that is great. But yeah, I would say when they can't give you a quote, or to your point, if the service just starts slowly dwindling, um, any vendor that treats you really, really well up front and doesn't continue to treat you well, that's a negative thing that's just going to result in eventually us looking for something else. Obviously, for me, I have a pretty zero tolerance policy for dishonesty. If there's intentional dishonesty, that's definitely
Yeah.
yeah. If I can, and that's why I know this is sad. It really is sad, but a lot of times now, most of not all my vendors, but a lot of vendors I only email because that way I can point back to anything they said if they don't do what they said. Sometimes it's just you can't remember. You have a lot of conversations and you just can't remember what was said on the phone. But a lot of times they just forget. Anytime that that a promise was made that kind of went to your favor. So now, unfortunately, I get a lot of things in writing. I think a lot of it is just being so busy. But either way, I think it's a benefit for us both. So I would say, yeah, intentional dishonesty, anything like that, support falling off. You know, recommending me a product that I know is not, doesn't meet my needs. Those kinds of things.
One thing I want to add to that, and this has happened twice. This isn't really like with a VAR. This is like with a vendor where they make the product and support the product. For one, it's actually we're dealing with right now, and I'm going to take some ownership on this. We have a vendor where we've had a lot of reliability issues, and like right now, I've had a frank conversation with them. I was like, "Look, take it back." They found out that we were looking at other vendors, and told them I was like, "Yes," and I told them exactly why. I gave them specific examples. And I do think that's one thing where if you're talking with a vendor, like you need to give them specific examples of issues that you're having. And two, like this is one thing. Like I named those specific examples, and we had tickets open with those, but there were a lot of things that we were just kinda dealing with behind, and we just would take it as normal practice that these things wouldn't work all the time, but we didn't have tickets open with them, and I got to thinking about that. Like, I'm gonna give them a fair shake to stay with them, and
Hmm.
but, like, I told all the people at 4 County, I said, "For this vendor, every time there's an issue, like, we need to report it. Don't just grumble about it and say this product's garbage. Like, we need to tell them. It's not fair." It's just like, the end users for IT, for them, not to tell you of an issue, but complain about it to everyone else. No one wants that. That's just not good practice. And I guess I take a little bit of ownership with that because some of the things are stuff that I dealt with and I didn't do tickets for. But and so far they're actually doing pretty good about knocking out the issues. And anyways,
Hmm.
so you need to sometimes when you're considering leaving, I do think you need to give the vendor a fair shakeout and make sure that you've been doing your part, of that relationship.
Yeah, to give someone a second chance, right? I think kind of back to what I said earlier. I think that's the way you would want to be treated, right? Stuff happens. How many times have I've gotten behind on emails and not replied to someone, or replied to them and not been able to meet the deadline? Stuff happens from time to time, and I'd say, and this kind of goes back to the right time to move on. But I would say when things become a pattern in a negative way, like from time to time, everyone's gonna have a mistake, and periodically, and a lot of people will be like, "I'm gonna give them one mistake, and on the second mistake, that's it." With the way I look at things, I'm a time-based mistake person, right? So, like, let's say every year, I think an average person's going to make 2 or 3 mistakes, let's say. So I give you 2 or 3 mistakes, and if it's the next year, I clear your count. I don't revert back unless it's just egregious stuff, really large stuff. It's just like small basic stuff. I give everyone a benefit of doubt because I feel like I do that, and I wish people would do that for me. So, um, yeah, I think you know those are kind of the things that let it's definitely time. And you brought up a good point. Like I said earlier, relationships they take work on both sides. It's and you need that vendor matchup, right? You need the person that matches up best with you, and it may not be that the person that someone recommends to you may not be the right one. In fact, when I give recommendations for people, I would just say it's been good for me. I'm not promising it'll be good for you.
Hmm.
I never like to give job recommendations. People call me sometimes, hey, do you know this person? Are they going to be good? I'm like, I know them as a friend. I have no idea how they are as a worker. So sometimes I think a relationship is a relationship, and just because someone has a great relationship with one person doesn't mean it'll be the same with another person. You just really need to have the right fit. So we've gone through getting the vendor, what to look for. We're through the dating. We've gotten married to the vendor. We got the warning signs maybe of we might not need this relationship. But I would say, have you ever had a vendor break up with you?
Maybe not break up, but I've had one ghost me. And it's funny you mentioned it earlier, but it's honestly this was at another organization. But I was one of those people that took pride in knocking down the price as much as possible and used like every tactic in the book to do that and did it consistently. And I got to the point where they really didn't respond to me after a while. It was probably after way longer than they should have. After
Mhm.
a couple of years of just one knocking them down on price and two asking for help all the time. Anyways, not proud that was in my younger years, but that definitely happened. They didn't so much break up with me, but I definitely got ghosted by that vendor.
I've had a vendor. I want to say quiet quit. We we try to be very transparent with vendors. We're a pretty high performer organization, as I think you guys are too. And we tell them up front that we expect a lot out of ourselves, and because of that, basically, we also expect a lot of our vendors. Right? We expect a really good response when stuff that's not working out of ourselves as IT folks, and we're gonna ask the same of you. There's been a few vendors where that didn't align, and we definitely had the quiet quitting where they went through all the motions of doing it. They did like the minimum,
Yeah.
right? Just to keep like maintaining the relationship, but they they lost the 110%. They were 60% from that point on. So I guess in that way they quit. They didn't really want us anymore because we were too demanding, I guess,
Yeah.
of them. But yeah, we have had to happen one time. And honestly, I think a lot of that just goes back to transparency, which is honestly, if that person just told me, I wouldn't have cared. They were like, hey, all my other customers, they're just a lot more laid back, and you guys are pretty high strung, and I just don't think it's going to work out. Just like any good dating relationship, I once had someone tell me that if there was no way in your mind, if there's absolutely no way in your mind that by the time you went on a third date, that you couldn't see yourself in any way being in a marriage with that person, you should call it off right then. If it just there's just no way this person dating might be fun, but there's no way I could see them then to go ahead and do it. And I think that's to your point with the pilot projects and stuff. I think um, don't string out a bad relationship. If it's not working, be transparent. Talk to them. If they want to fix it, if you want to fix it, great. If nobody wants to fix it, then you know that's okay too. It's better off to just go ahead and cut the cord and move on to another vendor, and it's really better for both of y'all. I think final thoughts for me is having a good match requires work on your side and the vendor side. And yeah, there are some things that vendors do that annoy the heck out of me, but I also got to remember that there's probably some things that I do that annoy them. Find the good match for you. If it's not the good match for you, find someone else. If you're a vendor, don't take it personally if it doesn't work out. If you're one of us and someone quiet quits or they tell you they ghost you, is then don't take it personally. It's just it didn't the characteristics didn't align.
Yeah. For me, I would just say I know I've said a few negative things, but we've got a lot of great vendors that we work with. And honestly, they've saved our bacon several times, and there's some where, they're like an extension of the team. Like, I trust them as much as any of my folks. I've got one vendor, I trust them more than myself. If they said a decision and I come up with a different answer, I would second guess myself and probably lean towards they're probably right.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's really important to keep those relationships, and I think it's important to test, like, pricing every once in a while. When you got someone that, they're treating you like, you need to have some loyalty to them. Someone might
Hmm.
beat them in price every once in a while, and, if they're treating you right, like, throw them a bone because they're gonna help you out when you're in need, and anyways, it's just really those relationships are important, and if you don't think they are, like, you're missing out.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap us up with a story on that. We had the exact situation with the vendor that we use. Um, and we didn't beat them up on price. We just kind of made sure they were within line. But I guess we never did talk about that. But it's pretty easy to check whether or not you're in line. CDW usually post prices for hardware. You can always check against them. But this vendor, they've been a great vendor to us. We've been loyal to them, and some hard drives got shipped to us. And these were shipped out of a warehouse. This particular person, had nothing to do with how they were packed. They came in, they were just slapped in a box. A little bit of packing, but not proper hard drive packing. All the hard drives were working. There's nothing wrong with them. But I mentioned it to this person, and they said, no, send them back. They were all working. There was nothing wrong with any of them. So most vendors would say, hey, if it's working, then okay. But they basically said it didn't meet their standard. So they took them back anyway, even though all of them were working and then it happened again. The exact same thing happened again, and they did it again, and they took it back again. And honestly, by the time we got to the third time, I'm sure they maybe made no money on that or very little. But those are the kind of things that just make me a customer for life. If this person's listening, they'll know because it was a pretty unique situation. But that's the kind of thing, and that's why I suggested not being loyal to the person because whenever you really need it, they're going to come through for you. All right. Any final thoughts, Anthony, before we sign off?
Just add on one thing, and you already mentioned it though. People make mistakes. We've had vendors make mistakes, and we've made mistakes. And I think sometimes it depends on what it is. I definitely be willing to overlook mistakes because they happen. Just have a little bit of give your vendors, especially your good vendors, a little bit of slack when they need it.
Yeah. And on the vendor side, I would say the better you are, the more slack you get. So I think it's kind of that like treat others you want to be treated. If you're loyal to them, they're going to give you the benefit of a doubt. If they've been a great vendor, you're going to give them the benefit of a doubt. Find that vendor that works for you. Find the vendor that we've talked about. Those vendors that are, there's just great people that are always honest, that have that integrity. There are those people out there. I mean, when you find those people, hold on to them because it's not always easy to find the perfect match for you. And with that, Anthony, this is another episode of Off the Wire.
Thank you, everyone.